From 2007 through the summer of 2010, the city of Texarkana, Arkansas, was terrorized by a series of violent attacks. Horrific traps and IEDs of murder and mayhem were left in public, such as the car wash outfitted with flamethrowers, the limb-shredding wood chippers placed in vending machines, the locking phone booth with a built-in hydraulic press, and most infamously, the supercharged high-intake pumps at the public pool, and many more. All were signed with graffiti reading DTK. The press dubbed him the Death Trap Killer. In reality, he was a mild-mannered engineer named Don Lake, a single dad who had made his young daughter Cassie a sidekick and a protege. As Daddy worked, young Cassie would write the DTK graffiti somewhere nearby. But it didn't stand for Death Trap Killer. It didn't even stand for DTK. It meant Daddy plus Cassie. D plus K. One night, a rogue police detective named Eddie Barnes tracked DTK down to the isolated warehouse that he used to perfect and build his traps. 10-year-old Cassie watched on helplessly as the two men killed each other. And then she realized she was alone. Cassie had no one to call, no one to help her out, no one in the world that she could tell the truth about what had happened. So she stayed by herself in that death trap-filled warehouse, the one that she had thought of as a personal playground. A few days later, she was visited by two men. A shadowy government agent named Bill Handel, and a kindly priest named Frank Rourke. But they didn't want to punish Cassie. They wanted to help her. This is the story of Cassie Lake and the journey that leads to the return of DTK. Drinking whiskey in the kitchen and telling scary stories around the fire. Music, monsters, and mayhem, killers, cannibals, and cults. Fearful fiction and furious fact, tall tales, and terrible truths. This is a scary home companion. Bill Handel and Frank Rourke had not worked together in a number of weeks when they got the call from Texarkana. At this point, they were the top-level fixers for their respective organizations, the very best at smoothing over potential problems. The DRO wanted this DTK thing resolved quickly, quietly, and without keeping local law enforcement 100% in the loop, as was their standard modus operandi. Bill and Frank enjoyed a brief reunion, but quickly got to work. In a matter of just a few hours, a single afternoon, they were able to figure out what the local authorities never did: that Don Lake was DTK. In tracking down the missing man, they easily sussed out the whereabouts of his secret death trap factory. But Cassie, she was a surprise. Even to a couple of old hands like Bill and Frank, this was a twist. The priority of the DRO and the marching orders for Bill Handel was to cover it all up, to make sure no one ever found out that Don Lake was the death trap killer. So you can see how the presence of a young accomplice was a bit of a hiccup. They led Cassie outside into the car where they sat and talked. They explained what they knew and then let her fill in a few of the blanks. Cassie was still shell-shocked, but Frank managed to get through to her. Cassie, listen to me. You're not in trouble, okay? You're not in trouble. Bill and I, we're not going to tell the police or your teachers or anyone else. This, your dad, this can be our little secret, and no one ever has to know. Unless you want to tell them. Are you going to tell them about your dad? Cassie shook her head. She wasn't tearful, nor was she fearful, just withdrawn, sullen, blank. Bill told her, "We will find you a place to live. You will be taken care of, I promise you. But you have to keep the secret. And you have to stop doing the things your daddy made you do." Cassie shook her head again. He hadn't made her do anything, and she kind of resented the insinuation against her father's character. With the reach and the influence of Bill Handel and Frank Rourke collectively, they managed to make a few phone calls, pull a few strings, and they got Cassie set up with foster parents the next day. Before he left, Frank gave Cassie a handheld tape recorder and a business card with a phone number on it. He said to her, "I am going to call you every single week to say hi, see if everything's okay. It's okay to talk to me about our secret, but nobody else. If you can't wait until my phone call and you need to talk into this. Sometimes it helps to say things out loud. So if you can't talk to me, record it here and I'll listen to it. I promise it'll make you feel better. And if it's a super duper emergency, call the number on this card." Frank offered her a hug, and she accepted it, but she didn't hug back. This began a new normal in Cassie's life. One, at first, that lacked purpose. Cassie missed her father so much. But there was a lot more going on than just longing and loss for the dead man. They had been doing great work together. Important work. They were a team and they were working for a cause. So now, she had no family, she had no team, she had no cause. Until 2 months later, when school picked up again, and Cassie met a girl named Susan Barnes, daughter of Eddie Barnes, the detective who had gone missing 2 months earlier and was still very much MIA. Merely being in the same classroom with the flesh and blood of the man who killed her father, that was bad. It was not nearly as bad as all the attention that was lavished upon Sue. She was a popular girl. She was still mourning very publicly, and everyone rallied around her. No one rallied around Cassie. Her father went missing too, and it seemed like nobody gave a shit. No one except for Frank. As good as his word, Frank called her every single week. Even if he didn't have time to talk for long, he still called to remind her that she was in his prayers and that he loved her. She started making the recordings a lot more. It was her therapy. And whenever she filled up a whole tape, she would mail it to him.
My father was all I had. Mother went away. It was just me and him. Father worked at home all the time. He said it was us against the world. Sometimes he let me help him with his cases. I asked him why he worked so much, and he said it was because he wanted to make the world a better place. I used to think that he... When will you come back to visit? Can you take me out to see Dad? I wish my stupid teacher would go headfirst into a dumpster filled with chainsaws. That's what I wish. Acid costs so much money. I have to figure out how to pressurize the delivery system. I know it's silly. I just really like acid.
Although she could no longer work on machines or traps, Cassie still had a preponderance of ideas. So she started making scale models of these ideas and graduated to making full mock-ups of entire trap rooms so she could visualize them and work out the calculations and the logistics. She did her best to keep this work hidden, but eventually her foster parents found these models and they made her see a psychiatrist. Cassie lied and said that she had always believed that DTK had killed her father. And she sort of became obsessed with the case, and she knew it wasn't healthy. They bought it. They believed her. But still, she knew that now she was being watched. So she gave up on the models, and she stuck to things that were easier to hide, like drawings and blueprints and schematics. In 2013, Frank Rourke missed his weekly call for the first time. And again the following week. And again the following week. Finally, Cassie got worried enough that she called the emergency number he had left for her. It had been disconnected. Cassie was surprised at how disappointed and sad she felt about this. She wasn't prone to deep feelings or connections, but over the last couple of years, she had honestly come to believe that the priest cared for her. 3 months passed. And one day, Cassie came home from school, like normal, to find that her foster parents were gone. Sitting on the couch waiting for her was Frank Rourke. He had even remembered her very favorite and brought her several bags of gummy worms. Frank hugged her, and this time, Cassie hugged him back. Frank knelt down and looked her in the eyes. Up this close, she saw something she hadn't noticed before, a hint of green behind the black of his pupils. It was immediately crystal clear to her that he was different now. "I listened to your tapes," he said to her. "Every one of them, time and again. Do you still want revenge against this girl, Susan Barnes?" Cassie nodded yes. "Good. I want to help you." She showed him her sketches, her schematics, her plans, and the priest with red hands beamed with sinister pride. Frank Rourke had disappeared from Cassie's life and had returned as the priest with red hands. She liked him much better this way. The priest ushered in a series of major changes in her life, the first of which was the absence of her foster parents and the appearance of a doughy old woman waiting for her in the kitchen. "This is Eloise. She is your aunt," the priest explained. "Your father never told you or anyone else that he had a sister. But here she is, with all of the legal documentation to prove it. Do you understand?" Cassie nodded. "Of course you do. Eloise is not your boss. She's not your teacher, and she's not your aunt. Eloise is your shepherd. She will keep the wolves at bay so that you can develop, blossom into what you are supposed to be. Eloise is very special, Cassie. She's an emissary from another place. And she will remain in constant communication with me." Cassie didn't have to ask what had happened to her foster parents. It would have been uncouth to ask such a thing out loud, especially when she already knew the answer. She was also returned to her former playground, the Death Trap Warehouse. Now it was to be her personal laboratory and testing ground. She didn't have to build models anymore. She could do real work, like her father did. She still went to school, of course. She maintained appearances. But every free hour that she had was spent in that warehouse. And the phone calls resumed. They were less frequent now, once or twice a month maybe, and their content was remarkably different from before. The priest was her mentor. He listened to Cassie's thoughts, her feelings, her dreams, and he gave her pointed, logical advice.
Engineering has rules. People don't. That's what I thought, but I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about, and you're right. I hate to say it, but you're right. I have to approach my plans for the people the same way I do with my machines. All these idiot teenagers I'm around every day, morons, pieces of... I'm trying to work my scoring, like you said. So I'm going to use what I know about them, about her, to push her in the right direction. It won't take much. She's still so boo-hoo about her stupid father. I cannot wait. Frank, I can't emphasize this enough. I cannot wait to see the look on her face when she finally sees him. Like that, all squished up and mashed to pieces. Did I ever tell you that I was my first trap? It was my idea. Daddy and I built it together.
Thanks to the priest's red wisdom, Cassie adopted a new public persona, at least whenever she was around Sue Barnes. This Cassie was smart and funny and bright and sassy and ever so supportive of her new bestest bestie in the whole wide world. Gently, over time, she coaxed and guided Sue Barnes into investigating the DTK case deeper and deeper. Cassie was always the loyal wingman every step of the way as she paved the path towards the terminus that she was building out in that warehouse. Everyone she knew bought it hook, line, and sinker, especially Sue. As time wore on, Cassie became a regular part of Sue's clique of friends. And everyone thought that Cassie was a little fish swimming in Susan's wake, when she was a shark stalking her prey in the shallows until it was big enough to be worth eating. Cassie was a patient girl. There was always so much to be done, and she never wasted any of the time that she was allotted. She did just enough to maintain bare minimum grades at school, just enough to not draw extra attention. But in her spare time, she studied electrical and mechanical engineering, computer programming, hydraulics, HVAC, metalworking, die casting, arc welding, every single facet of machine smithing. By 2016, her advances were nothing short of staggering. Her capacity for learning seemed as limitless as her energy reserves. Cassie often only slept for 2 hours a night and rarely left the warehouse except for school and keeping up social appearances. She never neglected that aspect of the game, not at all. Machines were one thing, but the plan was another thing. And the plan required a lot of delicate handling. She was better at machines, but she knew the machines were useless without the plan to feed them. In their senior year of high school, 2017 into the beginning of 2018, Cassie ramped up her gradual escalation and moved into the final phase of her master plan for Sue Barnes.
It's easy to be happy around her. She really brings out the best in me. Whenever I'm with her, I think about everything I know that she doesn't know. I could answer every one of her questions anytime I wanted. I have all the knowledge, all the power. She knows nothing. It makes me feel good, knowing how it's going to end for her, knowing I'm going to kill her, right on top of her dead dad. And there's nothing she could do to stop it. It makes me smile. I don't know if you can hear in my voice, but I'm smiling right now.
Finally, Cassie felt ready. She felt that the warehouse was complete. The priest with red hands came for a guided walk-through tour. It was the first time that he and Cassie had seen each other in person in many months. The priest had been very busy, he said, but he looked strung out, sallow, sunken. He was fighting a war, and it seemed to be wearing him thin. But once they started talking and walking and confiding in each other, Cassie was comforted by the sameness of his voice, by the dominance of his presence. The priest praised her ingenuity and her engineering in equal measure. He told her how proud her father would be of her. And then, for the first time, the priest told her something that she never knew about her father, about her father's family, about her bloodline, her roots, where she had come from. In that moment, Cassie's world started to make sense for the first time. She had a purpose beyond revenge, beyond what her father had ever dreamed for her. It was time for her endgame. Graduation day was coming, in more ways than one.
I almost feel sorry for them. Some of them. Ashford and Misha are both very capable in their own way. Strong women. Part of me hopes it works out for them, but I know it won't. It can't. No one can escape the warehouse, my playground. It'll be so exciting to see it up close and personal, to see the traps in action. Dad and I always had to sit far away. This will be better. No machine is smarter than a person. There's always a chance that someone will think of something I hadn't considered. If that happens, I'll improvise. I have several backup plans in place, you know? Have I mentioned Misha? The others call her Pete Rose for some reason. I think she will get the acid shower. Just my gut instinct. I'll bet you a bag of gummy worms on that.
At long last, after so many years of preparation, the night came. Prom, graduation, and coming out all rolled into one. Her night. Her precision in both machinery and human manipulation would be put to the ultimate test. No backup, no safety net. Everything rested on her shoulders. I am quite sure that you're familiar with the events of that night that were chronicled in detail in the episode called DTK, Death Trap Killer. So I won't bore you with all the gory details once again. But in a nutshell, Cassie laid a trail of breadcrumbs that Sue and her friends Misha, Astrid, Obi, and Benny followed out to the warehouse. They were in hot pursuit of the legend of the DTK killer, and they walked into the lion's den to be horrifically murdered one by one by one, until it came down to just Cassie and Sue. Just like Cassie had planned, down to the last detail. She had followed Sue to the very end, had studied her, had watched her face shift as she saw the evidence and recreated her father's death in her mind. It gave Cassie such pleasure to push the button and smash closed the jaws of her very first death trap. And the cherry on top of it all? The dying Sue Barnes had picked up her dead father's gun and aimed it at Cassie, just like her dad had done. It was so fucking perfect.
I'm actually getting bored with it. It was all going so well, and I'm excited about the results. But I want more. This isn't the end. This is the beginning, Dad. Grandpa Frank, you said you had things I could help you with. Now that I know the truth about who I am, I want to help. When I'm done here, you're going to be so proud of me.
After Sue Barnes had her last gasp, Cassie walked out of the warehouse, unfettered by history, never to return. Frank was waiting for her. So was Aunt Eloise. Frank hugged her. There were gummy worms in the car, and as they drove away, they began to discuss the future. The following day, a local cop named Detective Macklin, former partner of Detective Barnes, received an anonymous tip about a mass murder crime scene. By the time he arrived, the media was already there. Everybody had been notified at once. In attempting to breach and enter this warehouse to collect the dead, 3 police officers and 2 other first responders were killed, and 7 more were injured. Because Cassie had reset and activated every trap in her playground before she left. After enough fresh blood had been spilled and enough of a public spectacle had been made, a series of small thermal charges lit the facility ablaze in a white-hot conflagration that reached up so high into the sky they could see it from Texarkana. Authorities would spend the following months sifting through the rubble, trying to piece together exactly what happened. But one thing was for goddamn certain. DTK was back. Bill Handel was in his office when the call came. His friend and trusted agent, Kevin Koja, contacted him with an update about DTK. Yes, I heard about that. It was all very cinematic. I assume the girl is one of our assets now. No, Koja informed him. We actually didn't have a hand in this, apparently. This was all her. Interesting, Bill said. So why are we talking about it? Will you look at the file that I just sent you, please? Bill clicked and opened the email on his computer. Kevin said to him, "This is a demonstration of the genetic makeup of Cassie Lake. It's her DNA profile shown in colors. I understand. Why are you showing me this, Agent Koja? Do you see these markers that are highlighted here, here, and here? Now, look at this one. And look at these markers here, here, and here. You see how they match? Yes, I do. This is Cassie Lake. And this one, this is you, Bill. I know you always said you were an only child, but genetically speaking, Cassie's related to you. She's your niece. Don Lake was your brother." Thank you for listening to another episode of A Scary Home Companion. Contact the show through social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can message us directly at ascaryhomecompanion@gmail.com. Subscribe to the show, leave a review if you would be so kind, or buy show merch on Redbubble. Best of all, wander over to the Patreon for a veritable feast of bonus content and extra episodes. If you like the show, please support us. Help us extend our gnarly tendrils into pop culture. Guest voice this episode was provided by the talented and lovely Evangeline Hensley. It was produced and edited by Jeff Davidson, who is also very lovely. With featured music, You'll Become What You Fear the Most by Natural Snow Buildings. Sleepwalker Part 4 by Sergey Cheremisinov. Kernel Panic by Jacopo Torre. Panic of the Following by Jeremy Bible. Blades by The Wire Orchestra, and as always, the theme music by Chelsea Oxendine. On the next episode, A Scary Home Companion revisits the story of Jack the Ripper. After his savage ceremonial mutilations in Whitechapel in 1888, the Ripper came to the New World. Called by his dark god, he came to America with a bold design, one that would shape history and darken the soul of the world. Prepare yourself for the last journal of Jack the Ripper.